2015, 2016, this property was bought for about 30 million. In fact, it was 26 to be precise, but the market value was about 30. We got a discount on the property. The consent fees as at that time was probably around 900,000. Okay? Today, okay, a fraction of that property, you're talking about a neighborhood of, say, 18 million, thereabouts. Lekki phase 1, for example, it took about 25 million in 2015 to process a governor's consent. They are saying now it could be as much as 180 to 250 million. I do not think there has been a very fair balance.
Considering the fact that there's a housing shortage, considering the fact that there's a lot of complaints about prices of properties, considering inflation,
yes,
why make this move now? Welcome to another exciting episode of Square Meter Stories, the real estate show that keeps you informed and enlightens you. Today's topic, we're going to be dealing with a news that seems to be shaking up the industry a bit. And that is the announcement by the Lagos State government of a 300% hike in land transaction fees. With me to discuss this and look at the implications on the market is none other than Architect Akinde Olamide.
It's a pleasure to be here once again to discuss issues affecting real estate and the implications to investors and those who have interest in real estate. So it's always a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you once again, sir. Let's get right into it. 300% hike. Now, there has been a bit of confusion for those who are not familiar with the processes of construction in Lagos State. Some think it is a 300% hike in approvals, but the news actually is about a 300% hike in land transactions. Can you throw more insight on that? What exactly is going on?
Okay, so there's this thing called the fair market value, of properties. It's a kind of like a framework, that has always been in place. So it's not like it's anything new. Okay. The reason why it's creating a lot of buzz right now is because of the supposed hike. I mean, if anything, 300% jumps at you. If you hear 10%, 15%, people will probably not give it as much attention. But 300%, you're like, okay, what is this particular thing? It's always been there. And it's a framework that has kind of guided how Lagos State assesses property transactions, yeah? Because in the course of, transacting with properties, there's a need for you to pay certain fees and then obtain certain documentation. Yeah. The most popular is the consent or the C of O, right? And these are title documents, that give you the right to assign properties, or have the right to also hold properties, so to speak. And what is happening right now is the government has decided to revise that framework. I think it is like a 5 to 10 year period, they used to revise it. I think the last one was done 2015. Yeah. And of course, since then, we've seen a lot of increase, in property prices. Naturally, inflation causes the prices of things to go up. The price that you bought land in 2015 certainly is not the price that land is going for today. So there's a need for a revision somewhat. And to your question, it is not the approval fees. There are two separate things. Approval fees is what a developer will pay the state government for reviewing whatever construction or development that he wants to put up. So they assess it and then you pay certain fees for that, for the processing of the approvals for that development. In this case, what is being reviewed is for property transactions, meaning things such as your stamp duty, your governor's consent, and some other related documentations, that you do with the Lagos State government regarding a property. So the hike in itself now is, Lagos State government is saying, we know that property prices have appreciated. It's been a long time that we reviewed this particular thing. And because property prices have appreciated so much, and in Lagos State, I would dare say that real estate is the crude oil of Lagos State. Yes. And it's a major means by which it generates its IGR, its revenue. So it is now like turning all screws, focusing on that which it is bread and butter, and trying to, to get or to extract value from that which it feels is the appropriate fair market value to attach to properties. So we will unwrap more as you ask questions, but that basically is the framework of what's going on.
Why 300%? Yes, I know that between 2015 and now.
Yeah.
I mean, let's take Lekki Phase 1, for instance. 2015, 1,000 square meters was probably going for maybe 100 and something, or 200, 300.
Maybe in the 300 range,
yes,
thereabout,
300
yes.
range thereabout.
Correct.
And currently, 1,000 square meters Lekki Phase 1 is going for about 2 billion, 2.5 in some instances. So that's a lot of money. But 300% hike.
Okay.
That still sounds crazy.
Okay, so I would say maybe it's probably because, like I said, it's been a while this has been reviewed. And you rightly said, in 2015, if you go back to see how much prices were going for at that point, and you compare with today, indeed, things have almost 3-4x'd.
Yes.
Okay? So like Riley said, land in Lekki Phase 1 in some parts was going for as high as 300-ish million in 2015. Today, you would struggle to get 1,000 square meters for 1 billion.
Yes.
And that is the simple fact.
No, you can't get 1,000 square meters for 1 billion.
You cannot. So what your government is saying that, look, we've been watching this thing happening, and it's like, I mean,
now it's time we come for our own share.
It's time we kind of come for it, So, but the fear and the panic, so to speak, particularly with practitioners like us, is the implication, on the property market. Last year, I think we, in our end of year episode, we talked about the outlook for the year,
Yes.
and we said that real estate itself outpaced oil and gas, so to speak. What was it? No, it actually outpaced oil and gas in its contribution to the economic GDP, right? And contributions, and that's because there's a lot more interest. Even I dare say, Jim Ovia, okay, who recently retired as the chairman of Zenith, said he's going to real estate full time. He's going to real estate full time, and he says the real estate actually returns more, than other asset classes. And so people are saying, what is in this thing? So the government has definitely seen that there's a lot of transactions, and this is also on the back of the increase in the market value of these properties. So it's just trying to get its own fair share, for its own use, generating revenue and also driving all the infrastructure developments that you see left, right, and center. My concern, like I said once again, is the impact on the market.
We'll talk more about the impact on the market later, but there are lots of things to unpack. So I want us to try and break this down, because it's easy for people to hear 300% and not really appreciate the weight of what that figure is. You are a developer. Can you give us an insight? Take Sangotedo, for instance, or any part of Lagos. What was the processing fee like before this hike? And what would that processing fee be looking like right now? So say you bought a land for 200 million, say a year ago.
Yeah.
I know Lagos State has this thing they do, it's divided into different zones.
Zones, yes.
Yes. So, but let's take Sangotedo, for instance.
Okay, so but it's not even a zone thing anymore. When it comes to approvals, it's a zone thing, because you definitely have high density areas. And, you have that pool, for development high density areas. Yes. And the incentive, so to speak, for areas that are not as dense is that you want to encourage development there. So I think that is kind of like the framework for how assessment fees are kind of graduated, from high density areas to low density areas. But in the case of property transaction fees now, that's the title fees, to the illustration I wanted me to make. So in, let me use Ajah, as an example.
Okay.
In Ajah, there was a property that I think in 2016, 2017, thereabouts, we did a governor's consent for. Property at that time was worth, this is about 1,300 square meters thereabouts. That property, we bought it for probably 30 million.
I saw the smile on your face.
I
saw the smile on your face.
No, the smile is acknowledging the fact that indeed, right, property prices have really escalated. So it's more or less like you have your hand in the cookie jar, as a developer, and you can't really critique what the government is saying because it's a fact, so to speak. Yeah, I'm a practitioner and I know these things. They are not fabricated stories. 2015, 2016, this property was bought for about 30 million. In fact, it was 26 to be precise, but the market value was about 30. We got a discount on the property. The consent fees as at that time was probably around 900,000.
Wow.
Okay, to process the governor's consent, which you obtained in a matter of, I would say, about 3-4 months thereabout. Today, okay, a fraction of that property, a fraction, when I say a fraction, was somebody was trying to process a consent, and the consent was for one of the units, okay, that we had developed on that property.
Yeah.
And that unit measured in square meters, about, say, 150, 180 square meters. So that property in itself was valued at, the transaction fees was about, say, 2.6, 2.7 million. And so if you look at 150 square meters of land, which the person is processing the consent for, and you kind of extrapolate
to the
entire thing, you are talking figures of, you just multiply that by, say, 180 to get to about 9, okay? You're talking about a neighborhood of, say, 18 million, thereabouts, would be what I project we may pay for it if we were to do it all over again. But there's a lot of unclarity right now. I mean, they said it took effect May 1st, but we have yet to, as a company, apply for a consent since that date to see if really it is as what Lagos State has said it will be. Because they said, in Lekki Phase 1, for example, it took about 25 million in 2015 to process a governor's consent. They are saying now it could be as much as 180 to 250 million. So easily, you are processing your title documents for 10% the value of that property. Now that's very huge.
That's huge. That is huge. I read recently the Lagos State government said they made about 80 billion.
Yes.
From approvals.
That's data, yeah. 80 billion.
80 billion,
yes,
from approvals.
In 1 year.
In 1 year.
Correct.
That's not even talking about transaction fees
That's
before
just
this increase. That's just approvals.
Approvals is what you need to pay to execute a development on a property that you bought. That is separate from transaction fees. So go on with your question.
So the question is, obviously, the government is making a lot of money. Like you said, for Lagos State, this is crude oil.
It's
the
crude
real
oil.
estate industry is crude oil.
Yes.
Why tighten the screws now? Yes, I understand it's been 15 years.
Yeah.
But considering the fact that there's a housing shortage, considering the fact that there's a lot of complaints about prices of properties, considering inflation.
Yes.
Why make this move now?
Okay, so I can't really argue on the part of the government, but what I would do say is that we are all seeing the effects, of the projects, okay, that have been undertaken, particularly on the island here. I can't really say much for the mainland, but on the island here, it is so easy to crisscross locations now. You can almost predict when you get to a location, when you say, okay, I'm leaving this place X and I'm going to Y. And that's the effect of good infrastructure. And I know, Lagos State itself, is rapidly expanding. It prides itself as a mega city. There's a Vision 2030 and all of that, and where they see Lagos State headed. And there's so many more infrastructure projects that are in the pipeline. There's a need to fund all of that. So there's probably justification for why the fees have to be reviewed. Now, should it be reviewed 300% is where practitioners like us have, concern. Because ultimately, the buyer would have to somehow take a hit. Definitely. Practitioners themselves, we may decide to revise, our profits, so to speak, more or less take some cuts. But ultimately, everything is still passed to the end user. Now, like you rightly said, in the face of inflation, in the face of the housing deficit, in the face of even the affordability of housing, and the pockets getting squeezed, as a result of things such as depreciation of the naira and all of that thing. all of those things, macroeconomic headwinds, we are very concerned as to how this would impact the industry. The industry has been growing, and has been contributing so well to GDP. It's still very early, to assess the impact it would have on the economy itself. Will it have an impact? I most definitely think so. And I also see other things which we'll also discuss happening with how people approach the issues of title perfections and maybe some other informal kind of agreements or arrangements that people may have to make so as to circumvent these very heavy costs. Yes. I mean, even developers would have to approach it from new angles. I mean, it is more or less like trying to be innovative with this, but at the same time, also seeing how to protect the interests of those who decide to transact. Ultimately, you buy a property, you want it perfected because it is the legal instrument by which you own the property and can also transact with the property, say using it as a collateral for some sort of financing or some sort of facility that you want to get from, a financial institution. I do not think there has been a very fair balance yet. Yes, is there a need to extract value from what is going on in the real estate space? It is hot and all of that by the government. I would say yes. Has there been a fine balance as to what would not impact the industry so negatively? I think it hasn't been fairly balanced yet. And I really worry as to how it will impact, number one, the economy, how it will impact transactions, how it will impact housing, and the confidence of investors who are investing in real estate. It may really impact it.
The other aspect I also want to look at, two aspects actually. One is how developers will respond to this. But the first question would be, do you see this as a way or a policy that would likely filter out who can play in the industry? In the sense of, do you think that this policy would chase out unserious developers from the market?
No. I think it's even going to do the exact opposite. Rather than chase out those who are unserious, I mean, it may even generate more people who are unscrupulous.
That was the other aspect I wanted to come to.
In going at it, because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And that's why I'm hoping that, it's not just a mere increase, What other maybe incentives could there be, for maybe compliance or incentives for developers who actually decide to toe that line, because it definitely would be for the good of Lagos State. If there's revenue, Lagos State is able to project its finances, in advance and predict properly, and also deploy when they receive these things. And we are all beneficiaries of this whole thing. I just said, a while ago, you leave a particular place and you can almost predict when you get to a particular place. So there is ease of movement. And, whenever infrastructure is deployed, it also it makes what's it called commercial activities really improve, and when people are able to interact and also do commerce better, the economy also grows and all of that. So there are benefits, but I really think it is going to give rise to people who also will circumvent, and those who may not be willing, like in terms of investors, people naturally want to cut corners. And then there will be a rise of people who will say, you know what, we know how to go about this, and we're not going to pay this particular thing, and we're going to find ways around it, those in the system as well. I know Lagos is also going electronic. We have to talk about that as well. I know it's also a means, for them to track things better. But I also worry that it may also give rise to things that would subvert those intentions and actually affect certain people who may not want to comply or who may know better about what is going on. So I have my worries about that too.
Yeah, so talking about unscrupulous developers, we were driving around the other day and we saw some development somewhere. And we just from the look alone, we were already
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
We were already like, how are they doing this? How are they? And this is on a road that people ply, a major road that people ply, and you'd expect that officials from the state government would, even in passing alone, would know something is wrong with the way these guys are going about this construction. Now, with this, to your point, are we likely to see an increase an increase of people trying to circumvent, cut corners on the quality of structures. Because it's a dangerous turn. If people say, listen, what we are talking about here, like you mentioned, is 10 to 15%, if not 20%, of your initial cost is already going to go into the transaction fees.
Yes, transaction fees, yes.
We are not even talking about all the other costs. Just 10 to 15 or 20%
No,
of
it's
that.
10%.
10%
yes,
is going to go into
costs.
that already from the get-go,
yes,
from the jump.
Yes.
And developers are going to sit down. Also, developers are going to sit down and say, see, if this is already costing this amount, aside the cost of the land, construction cost will be this amount. How much can I realistically price my property in the market? In their minds, for many, they are going to think, listen, we just have to find a way to cut corners. Is that something that is going to increase as we go along? Or are you seeing the government becoming more effective? I mean, if there's more money coming into their coffers, you'd expect there should be more effectiveness in their control. Building control.
And driving compliance.
Yes, and compliance. Do you see, which of these scenarios do you see playing out?
Okay, so I'll play the best possible scenario and then the worst possible scenario. So in the best possible scenario, what you just described what should happen. Of course, the government has more in its coffers. It's able to drive development of the state's infrastructure projects, and then also drive monitoring and compliance in such a way that everybody feels safe, and the industry itself is protected from unscrupulous elements. Is able to deploy its officers, professionals to the field to monitor how developments are going when things go well. And so that's the best possible scenario. It's also a very good defense by the government to say, if you have this much money, and we're able to forecast accurately what we have, we're also able to deploy those resources ahead of time, so much so that we achieve these very lofty goals in driving, the mega city framework, so to speak. But the worst scenario now is what I want to come to. There are people who even today, seem not to be able to get it right. And I don't know if I should use the word not be able to get it right, or they are deliberately cutting corners just to maximize profits. You rightly said that we drove by development, and it was just so glaring as to, are people who are buying this not even seeing what they are buying? Because let's even excuse those who are in the diaspora that trust people who are here to make decisions for them. But there are people who also are on ground, locals buying these properties, and you wonder, are they not seeing what they are buying? And because this is an encouragement to the person who is doing subpar projects, okay? Because ideally, the reward for that kind of a person should be abstinence from the project. People should just flee. And that should tell him something that, if I'm doing something wrong and people are not buying, then I better do what is right to attract people to buy. So this person now says, okay, transaction fees are increased. And that is if the person decides to toe that particular line. Remember, I said that it could also go, the other way, where people start to circumvent or invent new processes, to convince those that maybe they are actually complying with this particular thing. Because if you have a property and you have paid transaction costs on that particular property, you should have your title documents and you should sleep at night. But people now may, you understand, not bother to do those things, because, and then the investor who should be protected is not protected, because if you don't pay those costs, you don't get your documents. You don't get your documents, it's a risk. You should not even be developing the property without documents, because to actually apply for assessment fees, approvals, there are certain requirements, okay, that you must meet. And part of it is they want to see the title documents on the land. So there are people now who would say, you know what, to actually cut this thing off, I'm not even going to do any kind of thing. I'll try to bribe my way around development, settle those who come for enforcement drives, and continue to build this property. Ultimately, we know where that will go. They will mark that thing for demolition to come down. Those who have invested will sing tales of woe. But back again to those who say, you know what, if I actually do take on these transaction costs, that is 10% added just like that to my own development costs. How do I pass this to the buyer? How do I remain competitive in this space? The person says, oh, I can't remain competitive in this manner, because you don't know how that person is probably approaching his own project. You see him selling for 30 million, he also wants to sell for 30 million. Okay, properties are never 30 million. Let's say you want to sell for 100 million. Okay, and then the other person is selling for 90 million. You're already pricing yourself out of the market, except you have a USP that's something very unique about the project itself that will cause people to pay 10 million extra. But say you don't have that particular thing, what you have been is a commodity, terrace.
Yes.
So you want to also sell at 90 million so that you can sell out your properties. Then again, you don't know how that person is meeting that particular price or that price point. Then you say, okay, I would cut cement here, I will cut reinforcement here, I would use substandard this, I'll use substandard that, I'll paint it with something very beautiful, use fancy finishes.
Just do aesthetics,
basically. So the optics of what you see basically would attract people to buy, not knowing that this person has severely, undermined the integrity of that property. And then things start to fall off from the day you move in. And then you start to see cracks here and there. And what then happens? The house now would be in defect. Very recently, a property was a failure. I think it was in Oniro or something like that.
Yeah,
property,
I saw the video.
Yeah, very, 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 very sad. Who knows what happened there? But I won't be surprised if they do their investigative checks and they see that substandard materials were used, or maybe some things that should have been done were skipped. So imagine that being a developer who says, I have already taken on this cost, but I still want to meet this particular price point to stay competitive in the market. And then he does substandard projects and what the building collapses. What then happens? So I see that as a worst case scenario happening. But then again, those who are in the business, to actually add value, to stay competitive, would actually see how those costs will be absorbed. Definitely, it will increase the price of properties. And we're going to talk about that. The effect on the space. We really need to really assess that, to make it clear for our viewers what they should expect. Because if you think property prices are high now, the best possible time to buy is even still now. Because when this thing really takes effect, right now, we're still even selling properties and we haven't really factored this increment.
Yeah, because as a developer, by the time you are moving to your next site, you are going to pay all these transaction fees.
Definitely, we're going to pay.
And the people that ought to buy now from you and save themselves from that hassle need to act fast.
So that's why I'm saying that prices are even going to go up higher. But guess what? It's going to cause us to also reevaluate how we approach development. Okay? And this is my concern. There are just so many things to unpack, because you start to look at it as, if Lagos State government is increasing prices in this manner, and they know the effect on the cost of development, are they going to allow developers to stack more units into their development? Because when you go for approvals, they assess the property itself and they say you can only build X and X number of units on this particular land. And then how does the developer actually make his money back when he's constrained with the number of units he can develop? But if there's an incentive, I spoke about incentives too. If there's an incentive for the developer to build more units, of course, while also factoring the elements of design, in terms of functionality, in terms of integrity, of course, that structural integrity, and of course, aesthetics and the optics and all of that, he can actually pack more units in a way that the cost is more spread out, so that the effect on the eventual cost of the property to the buyer is somewhat maintained, or maybe just, I would say,
mildly increased.
It's just a mild increase, it's just a mild increase. So if all those things are done, the developer can say, okay, this is how I can process my costs, this is how I can really reevaluate and even do some value engineering to ensure that I remain competitive. But if it's about packing or placing the cost directly as we receive it from the government, okay, this is how we have gotten it, this is how we pass it to the end buyer, there are ripple effects on the property market and eventually the economy, because the economy gets a large chunk of its value from what happens in the property market.
And that also brings something else that kind of went under the radar, which you alluded to it, which is the Lagos State government moving approval processes online.
Yeah.
So no longer coming to
it's
the
no longer
office,
manual.
filing
the office.
papers and all of that.
Yes.
You push everything online and
Yes.
get your approvals online.
Yes.
Why are they? Yeah, I understand the benefits for going digital.
Yes.
But why now? Because I looked at it and I saw that it's also another healthy way for them to keep track of developments, especially for developers who
Yes.
falsely do their tax returns. A developer is coming to say he wants approval for a 2 billion, 5 billion naira project,
Yes.
and his tax returns is 200,000 naira. So,
Okay.
why is that just the only reason why they are moving it digital?
Okay. So, of course, when things are digital, there's more transparency. That's number one, and transparency also drives better planning. And if anything, I mean, the government wants to be able to plan better. So if you're able to realize certain funds and you can actually forecast very accurately that this is what is going to come in, and then with that, I can actually plan for that's in deploying capital, towards the actualization of this kind of projects, then, and things are done with a high sense of accountability, integrity, it actually is very beneficial. One of the other reasons I think, it's good to go digital is just it cuts so many, I would say, very murky, even till today, processes, so to speak. They boast of approval being doable in a 28-day time frame. While I would say, I mean, that is what goes on, or that is what we hear, is not necessarily what obtains. In many cases, I think the fastest we've gotten an approval was a month and 3 weeks. I mean, which is still very good, and I mean, even though there are still a few kinks for them to iron out, but going all digital is going to make them track things better. I think also that ultimately, even with the drawings, and I mean, there's also a fair chance that this happens soon, when drawings are reviewed digitally, of course, it's a lot less paperwork, it's a lot less expensive, but then it's also a lot easier for review, by professionals who are employed by the government to undergo or to kind of undertake, this review process, assessing drawings, ensuring that what is being done actually is developable in a manner that the integrity of the structure right from the get-go, even through design, is reviewed and is assessed as, okay, this is good, because not all things that are drawn on paper, even from the get-go, should be built. I mean, a good number, I'm not sure what the statistic is, of collapses are not necessarily by the use of or through the use of substandard materials. In some cases, it is just a failure of design. Okay?
Yes.
When you see a property that has collapsed, everybody says poor cement, poor blocks. I mean, of course, a lot of uneducated takes. But the professionals sit back and we look at sometimes the structure and say it may not necessarily be a failure of materials, the design itself. So when there's a lot more clarity, and a better access, to design, it is easier to also follow up. It's easier to flag, first and foremost, what may be impossible. Or they say, okay, this particular thing doesn't work here, this doesn't work here, go review this. And it's part of the process. So it's more than the money angle of it. Definitely the money is a big part of it, because I mean, that's where if you're talking about 80 billion, while doing manual, talk about how much more they will get if it's digital. Yes. And the digital thing also comes with increased costs. That's what a lot of people don't realize.
I was going to the aspect as well.
It's increased costs because we're talking about transaction costs, impacting 10% on the development costs. The assessment costs are heavy now.
Yes.
Okay? And I say so because a property, for example, that we did, I would say, last year, okay, was done at a certain rate, because again, earlier in the podcast, we talked about how the rates of assessments are graduated from high density areas to low density areas with the incentive to low density areas because you want more activities there. So the rates are a lot lower, in places like Ibeju, places like Sangotedo. In Ikoyi, the rates are a lot higher, okay? Yeah. So the idea now is, what they are charging is a lot more expensive now. So what could have, for example, been, say, 10, 15 million as assessment fees. Easily now with this EPPS is going to be as high as say 30, 40 million.
Wow.
Okay. And although it doesn't really impact so significantly, it's a tiny fraction of development costs, but still is a cost.
No, definitely.
And we have to pass that to the end user. So I would say there are a lot more things, benefits, than just the financial side. It is compliance. It is to ensure that people do the right thing. It's also to track developments. It's also to be able to plan better, for the city itself. And then for other reasons that the government thinks, it is appropriate.
Okay, then the other aspects that I'm interested in when it comes to these digital aspects, would the site be open to people, for buyers to quickly and easily check if a particular project they want to buy into has the necessary approvals?
I'll be surprised if that is one of the benefits, where it is going. Because, abroad,
You can check online.
You check all these things online.
Yeah.
Property titles, you know who has
Ownership,
the property. Ownership
everything.
is just that transparent. And I think, in all fairness to the government, and I'll say maybe kudos to them too, somebody up there may actually see where this is, may have a roadmap, so to speak, as to where this is headed. Everything has to be digital first and foremost,
Yes.
for you to have any kind of transparency or even accessibility. So in protecting the end user, this thing you just rightly said, I would not be surprised if it is somewhere, set as one of the objectives of going digital. Because how comforting will it be for you to be in the diaspora and then look up a project that is being marketed to you and you say, okay, I know that this property checks out well because it is approved. I know it checks out because there is a registered title on it. I know who owns it, not some people. I would jump very quickly to something I heard yesterday, after I relate this. So not multiple people owning a particular property, and I have the comfort of
Yes.
the level of due diligence. Although, you won't still cut out those who can still do it for you, because there's also street intelligence too in
Exactly.
property transactions. But but right from the get-go, I know who owns the property. I know if it has approvals. I know the professionals on the project. I know the architect. I know the structural person, because all these people should be
Their names should be attached to
they
their
should
work.
they should be identifiable.
Yes.
Okay, you should know X and X architect is the one on this project, not some baba something somewhere
Exactly.
who, or a draftsman. So it could also help the professional field as well, and there could be synergies. Beyond the early worries. If done properly, it may be very good synergistically for all stakeholders in the property chain, from the investors to the professionals even to the government. But my concern is a fair balance.
So gradually the system is becoming sanitized.
I would say we hope that's the direction.
hope that's the direction.
Because very early on, when there are innovative approaches, where you say, okay, this is the way we were doing it before, and then this is a different way we have to do it. It's like you're ruffling feathers, because people are comfortable. People don't really like change. But hopefully, it is in the direction that you're saying it is. It is
All right, so
a better thing.
let's
for
talk
people.
about the impact of these new fees, these prices, these increases
Yeah.
on the end user, which is the buyers themselves.
Yes.
Give or take, say how many percent increase? Because in my perspective, I think that within the next 3 months,
Yes. You
we'll
start seeing the
effect on the
amen
market.
amen to that.
We'll start seeing the effect on the
Yes,
market.
please.
So how much increase would the typical buyer should anticipate? Now that is assuming that, thank God, we've had stable FX rates for a while now.
Very well, yes.
So let us, although cement has kicked off,
See,
cement has gone back
I was waiting
up
for you to
again.
finish, because stable FX rate doesn't mean property prices have been the same. There are so many other things, there are so many undercurrents, that affect. I'm sorry for interjecting, because I have to come in here. The fact that FX has been stable for months, you still wonder why prices are going up. Okay, of course, the oil economy right now. The other global economic activities happening that are affecting the prices of oil. And of course, oil is very tied to activities on site. Logistics alone is one of the key things that makes construction very expensive. So prices of oil directly tied to the prices of property. Then number two is the fact that cement and other key construction inputs are still on the rise, despite the fact that we have a very stable FX regime, So there may be other things, that may be driving this, I would say, volatility, so to speak. Cement, I would say maybe early in the year was probably 10,005, was near
Yeah,
11,000.
yeah.
Today is 12,500. You're lucky if you get it at 12,005 in places, close to that. And that's because it's Lagos State. Outside Lagos is over 13, 14,000. So my concern now is, what would people expect, or what should they expect as the prices of properties going forward? In the next 3 months, I see easily prices jump at least 5 to 10%. And that is being
That seems very conservative.
very conservative.
Very, very
And why I'm
conservative.
hoping so, is that is not worse, is because if it jumps more than that, how then will people buy? Again, I said there are so many other factors that we have to think about here. There is still a very huge housing shortage, okay? The affordability of houses is still in question, I mean, we have a rising, middle class. I would say the access or the avenue for owning homes has been made better now by the availability of MREF. A lot of people are actually accessing it. I was in a conference about, say, 2-3 weeks ago, where it said that out of the 250 billion that was allocated, to MREF, I think about 180, 190 billion has been accessed. And it takes an average of, say, 28 days
Yes.
to about 38 days to process, if all documents are in order to process it. So there's actually better access, for mortgage plans, for the rising middle class. But then when these properties actually increase further, there's going to be an affordability problem. Okay, so my own hope is that there are ways in which developers would approach, this new reality, okay, in a manner in which the government also incentivizes developers, like I said earlier on, maybe being able to develop more units on a particular plot, allowing that, okay, in ways, of course, that ensure functionality, integrity is protected design-wise, and then it makes it possible for developers to accommodate the costs, of course, do value engineering, go back to how it can actually work so that we all stay competitive. Otherwise, if it just balloons to, say, 30, 40%, my concern is, yes, that would be the true market value of houses or properties, but who would be able to buy? Affordability. So I'm hoping things don't go crazy.
All right. So finally, the big question would be, a large chunk of property buyers, I mean, very good thing the government has done with MREF. Because before MREF, we are seeing Nigerian buyers, that's people based in Nigeria.
Yes.
Their investment in the real estate space seems to have been dwindling. And that was taking the huge part of it was taken off by Nigerians in diaspora. All right, but if we do get to a 20, 30, 40% increase in prices, do you still think that the real estate market will continue appreciating, or is the bubble finally going to burst? I mean, for years, people have been predicting that the real estate bubble in Nigeria will burst, the real estate bubble, and I keep telling people, say, you're not going to wait, tire, you're not going to wait, tire. But with this move, and let me also add this to it as well. Do you think the Real Estate Developers Association of Nigeria, REDAN, should get into some kind of negotiation with the government? You spoke about concessions, incentives for developers. So those are two questions right now. One, do you think the bubble is going to burst if we do hit a 20, 30% increase?
Yes.
And secondly, should REDAN find ways to get into negotiations with government in terms of concessions and incentives for the real estate developers?
Okay, so I don't think there's a bubble, okay? And so where there's no bubble, nothing is busting, Okay.
Are you speaking as a developer now?
I'm speaking as a prophet. But I
Because
must
I mean, you know this, I'm sure for years, over 5, 7, probably 10 years now, you've been
yes.
hearing of, because of the way the prices
I
just
know,
kept
I
going,
know, I
it
know,
seemed
I know.
unsustainable to
Yes,
many people.
yes, yeah.
But so far, there's no indication that that might happen.
So what I'll say is this: I think prices will still find their natural levels. Okay. The thing about bubbles and why maybe this was really touted as a bubble was the very unrealistic expectations of certain property owners. I would say developers too. That were flagrantly, pricing properties way beyond their acceptable market value. I mean, everybody wants to make profit and all of that, but you list a property beyond its price point and you are struggling to sell. You then see people, I mean, not for this episode, but you then see people saying, you know what, I enjoy 30% discount. Or you just see that this property that was listing for 1.2 billion, all of a sudden, maybe now sold for 800 million. Property prices would eventually find their levels or their natural levels, so to speak, and which is what I've been seeing happen. Not that the bubble is going to burst. No bubble burst. The reason why, maybe I would say very quickly, the housing crisis that happened in the US, I think 2008, 2009, and why it was all based on subprime loans. And very quickly, in like about 30 seconds, I'll just describe what it was. So people were able to access mortgages very easily without very secure diligence done, And then because the access to these mortgages were so democratized and also securitized too, because people were placing bets on the prices of houses rising and falling and all of that. And also people were being able to access mortgages so cheaply and easily. People who it was very obvious they had no means whatsoever of affording the mortgages. So people now accessing those mortgages and then listing them, for rentals and etc., hoping to be able to offset the mortgage payments by rental, incomes, and being unable to do that. So all of a sudden you had a financial system that was so encumbered by these subprime mortgages, toxic mortgages. And then you had everything wired so deeply into the financial systems. You had it into it was wired into the stock markets, wired into financial derivatives and all of that. So
by the time the financial markets was
imploded basically because it was so deeply ingrained into the fabric of the housing market. So, but here in this country, why it's not even close to a bubble is we operate a cash and carry system in this country. Okay, there is no financial system that is going to collapse, so to speak, as a result of what is just going to happen is that people are just going to get realistic, and that this property they are selling for this actually can go for that. And if by chance you were unfortunate to rope yourself into a deal where you thought, oh, by buying a house for 1.2 billion, I wait for 6 months and sell it for 2 billion, you're in for a shock of your life. Which is why, of course, you work with professionals that will be able to correctly value a property and say, okay, you know what? Best case scenario, this is this property's prices. And a forced sale value, FSV, as well, is this particular price. And then you make your objective decisions and everything. There is a lot of opportunities for people to gain, from correctly assessing what the value of properties is. Not just that, oh, I can sell a property for whatever price. So that's that about the bubble. Now, the second question was about Redan.
Before we come to Redan,
Okay.
something came to mind from what you just talked about concerning the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes.
I recently, now this probably shouldn't be in this episode, but, since we're on that, I recently heard a major player in the industry saying something, and his perspective was that the reason prices seem to be ridiculous in Nigeria is nothing more than speculation.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. You can say that. I would, speculation is what I described.
You agree with it? It's the same kind, a different way, but still speculation happening here.
That is exactly what I described. And is that, what people perceive as a price of something, and then you base the price of that property based on what this person has sold for. And then it now becomes the new standard. And everybody now prices based on the new standard. And then you have another person who comes now is able to make the initial investor profit, by buying from him, and then that new amount becomes a new standard. That's speculation I just described. And then by the time you're unable to now sell again, the price now falls to where it's supposed to be. And so the person who is now left, they call a particular phrase, the person who is left holding the ball or something like that, you're the one holding it when the music stops.
Exactly.
And then you're faced with the consequences of having an overvalued property.
So
that
means that a lot of properties have no real foundation for the prices being quoted for it.
So largely, it's a speculative market, but it's no bubble. Yeah.
All right. So to the reader.
So the reader question, the reader can actually play its role, as a very strong advocacy group or platform, so to speak. They can really engage with the government. They are recognized by the government. They actually can speak up, and talk to issues. They also can be like a kind of pressure group, as regards, what is happening, so that if a government says this and they say, no, this is actually what you should be looking at. And it actually comes with constant engagement. I'm hoping the executives, Redan, both at the state and national level, are doing what they're supposed to do, because we should actually hear their voices even more, that this is happening. Yeah. And that is what would drive investor confidence, when they see that the bodies, that are closely knit, that actually hold the industry accountable, or that shape the industry itself, are engaging with the government, and they are the ones who actually drive compliance. Pushes for compliance, pushes for the development, reform, and all of that. They are the ones who actually would now, get the fact that, okay, you know what, if this is the engagement we're seeing, and this is where the government is settling at, it is good enough, to drive the growth, and the sustainability of the industry.
All right. So thank you very much, Architect Olamidu.
It's been a pleasure. Time just flew by again.
I was trying to keep it short, but there's so much to unpack from this. So much to unpack.
And I would even dare say, that in the coming months, I think this is one particular topic that we should revisit, because if we are projecting to say this is the impact on property prices, in the short to medium term, you see how things are unfolding, and then hopefully help our viewers here, make sense of what that is happening in the industry.
All right, so thank you once again, and thank you for being with us on this episode of Square Meter Stories. We hope you found it enlightening. If you have questions, you have suggestions, you have an input, you want more clarity, do shoot us an email or send us a WhatsApp message. Our contact is on the screen. Thank you very much.